Okay, now I want to look at some individual questions. All right, so this is Joyce Lay from Substack. She's a founding member, so thank you, Joyce, for your generosity. Okay, she asked this question. You make 3 predictions about the outcome of the US-Iran war, but I don't have any time frames. Yeah, I don't do time frames because these things are trends, okay? They're general movements. Okay, and she says, well, if all 3 come true then we have to believe that it may not be because of the war itself. How do you differentiate between causation and correlation, okay? This is a great question, and it's something that I think a lot about. So I make these predictions in order to validate my prediction model. But just because these predictions turn out to be correct does not validate my prediction model 100%, okay? And that's why it's important to keep an open mind and to continue to make predictions. Now, what I will say is this. When I first started making predictions 2 years ago, I was just looking at patterns and then trying to figure out what patterns were the most salient or the most obvious. And then I made those predictions, and I was fairly confident about these predictions. Now that I'm famous, now that people are demanding I make predictions every day, it's hard for me to make accurate predictions because I don't have access to all the information. And it's hard for me to think clearly, objectively, because I know that whatever I say is going to have an impact on global events, okay? So this is a major constraint on my capacity to make accurate predictions. I am no longer an observer, I'm a player, okay? And I also get a lot of influence from other people who want to control my predictions. I understand that. So I try to keep away from people as much as possible, but it's an impossible thing. So I appreciate this question. Yes, correlation and causation are 2 different things altogether. It's possible that we'll never really understand causation. The other thing that I want to emphasize is that I myself appreciate the limitations to my own objectivity, okay, because of my status today. Okay, so that's from Joyce. Isn't Pump and every politician just a puppet of the societies? This is a great question. It's something that I addressed earlier, which is, yes, they are agents. They can only be agents. But at the same time, the agents have agency. The agents have free will. So think of Napoleon and Julius Caesar, and they were obviously supported by secret societies. But they reach a certain point where they can betray the secret society or veer off in a different direction. And Hitler and Stalin are also different examples, okay? So every great person in history, most of them are supported by secret societies, but they also reach a point where they feel they have a higher calling. And it is God that they must be loyal to. So they betray their secret society. And I think that something will happen with both Trump and Vladimir Putin. Okay. I have the Third Rome, I have the American Technate, and I have Pax Judaica. Wait a minute here. These are 3 different empires. And the reality is that this unipolar moment where America controls everything, it is unique in human history. It's not sustainable, and it will not last. So the idea of competing empires, it's much more common in human history. So yes, you'll have the Technate where America retreats into Greater North America, Russia exerts control over its territory, and Israel tries to build a Pax Judaica in the Middle East. And they will be in competition against each other. There'll be some areas in which they cooperate, there are some areas in which they compete. And so we are moving towards a multipolar world, okay? And we don't actually even know how long this multipolar world will sustain itself. Probably not very long, maybe 10 years, maybe 20 years, okay? All right. So this question is, why would the world be dependent on American fertilizers, energy, when the other parts of the world have energy and fertilizers as well? And the answer is trade access, okay? What America can do that other nations cannot do is basically retreat into its continental fortress and control sea trade, okay? So right now, the easiest way to trade is through the sea. And unfortunately, for the world, America controls the seas with its navies, okay? So what America can do is basically allow its ships to go anywhere in the world and block Chinese, Iranian, Russian ships from accessing the rest of the world. Now, a counter to this is that, well, you don't have to go by sea. If you were to unite Europe, Asia, and Africa and the Middle East, you can just use railways, and that's what China wants to do. The problem is Iran. That's why America is so invested in destroying Iran, because Iran is really the pivot of the world. If you can destroy Iran, it'll be very hard for China to access Belt and Road, and hard for Russia to trade with Africa. Okay? All right. I would challenge Professor Jiang on his assessment of why Russia attacked Ukraine. Russia was not prepared for the long war, and it adapted. Okay, yeah, so the general theory, the general explanation is that NATO provoked Russia into an attack. And that's true to a certain extent. But we have to remember that if you commit to a long war, if you commit to any war, you need to have a long-term strategy, because you need so many different organizations, institutions, parties involved in a war, okay? A war means a fundamental restructuring of society, and therefore you need a grand strategy, you need a eschatology, okay? Because this is what allows for political will. And that's the issue that the Americans are facing in Iran, where they don't really have an eschatology or grand strategy that's articulated, okay? There are people in America who do have the grand strategy and eschatology, but it's not articulated to the American people, okay? And that's why America doesn't really have the political will to sustain this war in Iran. So again, there's this misconception that these people, Putin, Trump, they just have these emotions, they're like, I want to go attack, so they go attack. That's not how these things work, okay? You need a lot of people to agree to attack Ukraine, to agree to attack Iran before these things happen, okay? The idea that one man can control an entire country, it is just a myth. It cannot happen that way. A country is controlled by different vested interests, different institutions. These institutions have to align together in order for something to happen. Okay? Otherwise, they'll just sit back and do nothing. And that's the situation that Iran faced in the lead up to this war, where everyone was like, you know the Americans, you know the Israelis are going to attack you, so take the initiative. Why are you still sitting around doing nothing? And the answer is because there are different factions, there are different institutions cannot align together on how to respond to the Americans and Israelis. So they just sat back and wait to be attacked, okay? All right. Why don't Asian and Middle Eastern nations unite to prevent American interference driven by its own interests? Okay. Yeah. Okay, another misconception is that the nation state, it is real. It is not real. It's just a made-up concept, okay? The idea of China, the idea of America, the idea of Russia, Iran, they're all made-up concepts. They don't exist. What these nation states are a collection of interests. Collection of elite interests. And all this means is that the people don't matter, okay? The people are a resource to be exploited by the elite. What matters is the elite. So the question then is, where are the elite, where are their allegiances, where are their loyalties? And the fact of the matter is that in East Asia, in the Middle East, much of the elite have their family and have their wealth all stored in the Western world. So they're not loyal to the people. They are never loyal to the people. They're loyal to themselves, to their families, to their social network. And because all of their wealth and family is located overseas, they're loyal to overseas. So these elite in Asia, in the Middle East, they are basically carpetbaggers, okay? And that's why we have this situation. And that's why, as things progress, nations that have very close relationships with the Western world, for example, the GCC, they are much likely to fall. They're much likely to collapse because these are very unstable countries. Whereas countries like Iran that have been isolated, ostracized by the West, are much more cohesive. Okay? All right. Can the Strait of Hormuz be avoided by laying gaps pipe through Oman? No, that's not how these things work, okay? What Iran is doing is using the Strait of Hormuz to blockade the global economy, to disrupt the global economy. The Strait of Hormuz is the most convenient way of doing so. It is the least controversial, but if forced to, Iran can also destroy energy production in the GCC. It can destroy like pipelines. If a drone can attack a city, it can attack a pipeline as well. Okay, so these pipelines are extremely vulnerable. And already we're seeing reporting that just yesterday, the Iranians attacked a pipeline in Saudi Arabia. These pipelines are extremely vulnerable. Just think about all this gas and oil, right? It's all combustible. So a drone can just blow it up. It's not hard. All right, so again, understand, the point is not the Strait of Hormuz, the point is the vulnerability and the fragility of the global economy that is completely dependent on cheap access to energy. That's where the problem lies. All right? All right. Donald Trump, he's erratic. Do you believe this behavior is calculated strategy, or does it stem from lack of understanding? Is he just stupid? Do you think that people advising him are also stupid, or are they strategic? What is he trying to achieve? Okay, again, this goes back to our understanding of how the world works. You have the eschatology, then you have the secret societies, then you have the agents, okay? And Trump is an agent. Now, what makes him a very powerful agent is his unpredictability. Today he's like, I'm gonna nuke Iran. Tomorrow he's like, let's have peace in the world, guys, okay? He's just unpredictable. It's all a show, okay? And there are three reasons why unpredictability is so powerful. The first reason is that it's paralyzing. Paralyzing just means like, you don't know how to respond to him. Like, what do you do? How do you fight a guy who changes his opinion every single day? Okay? It paralyzes you into inaction. Second is distracting. All your attention is focused on his antics, and you don't realize that behind the scenes, things are happening. Okay? There are people who are implementing certain things, but you don't really notice the backstage because you're just focused on Trump being a clown on stage. Okay? And the last advantage is flexibility, which is to say that he is not beholden to any strategy. And he can change his strategy at any time. Okay? So, yes, we think he's a clown, and he is a clown, but there's a method to his madness. Okay? So it paralyzes his enemies, it distracts his enemies, and he's able to maintain maximum flexibility in his actions, okay? And that's why he's so successful. All right, the people around him just do whatever he tells him to. People around just tells him exactly what he wants to hear, okay? It's actually Donald Trump that's making all the decisions. And his ultimate purpose is to get his third term. All right? Because from his perspective, if he actually wants to implement his vision for America, he needs the third term. Okay? And again, his vision is a technate, where America becomes a fortress, abandons the world, and just trades with the world. Okay? We discussed this previously. But for him to achieve that, he needs his third term. And so he needs to figure out how to get his third term. And this war in Iran is about strategy, because if this war continues and it goes badly for America, then Trump can declare martial law and have a lot of powers. Okay? And again, his enemies are too distracted to appreciate that this is strategic, and they're paralyzed into inaction. The Democratic Party which should be opposing Trump and this war, are just sitting back and doing nothing, hoping that in the midterms, Trump's party, the Republicans, get wiped out and they go into power, and then the world is perfect again, okay? So the Democrats actually don't have a strategy for this. All right. The GCC, the petrodollar collapses, okay? Let's pretend the petrodollar collapses. AI collapses, treasury bond collapses. Will the U.S. not suffer an economic and development catastrophe, which is not part of the U.S. plans? Yeah, this is a good question, but you have to understand, again, a nation state is a collection of different interests. And these interests are competing against each other. Okay, so you have different interest groups. You have AI, you have finance, you have resources. Okay, and so what matters is the general direction of the country. So if the economy were to collapse, the main losers would be finance and AI, okay? But then what America can do, because it's so wealthy and its people are so energetic, is, well, let's just focus on building resources, okay? Oil, food, water, fertilizer. Let's just make this stuff and sell it to the world. Then the economy rebounds, okay? So this is actually a restructuring. Okay? Something we talked about before, where the purpose is not to destroy America, the purpose is to move power away from one elite to another elite, okay? This is basically a revolution in America. AI can actually be saved, okay? With government bailout. And that's what I imagine will happen, okay? AI and finance, the bubbles will burst, finance will be allowed to collapse, AI will be bailed out, because Trump is very close with these AI overlords like Peter Thiel and Sam Altman. And then resources and manufacturing, okay, will become the dominant center of gravity in the American economy. Okay, so that's a plan. I'm not saying this will happen exactly like this, but that's what they intend to happen. All right. Transnational capital is a game master. Transnational capital will then take its money elsewhere if the empire collapses. So transnational capital doesn't lose any power. And they can just bet on different horses, Japan, Israel, Germany. Okay, yeah, so in my analysis, I use abstract terms that are not accurate, but are useful for simplicity and clarity, okay? So you're right in that transnational capital also have competing interests. And just because the empire collapses doesn't mean that all the money goes to Israel. This money will spread out. And that's true, okay? But the point I'm trying to make is that, first of all, most of the money will go to Israel. Why? Because Israel provides the best short-term investment opportunities if you're a trillionaire, okay? But you're right in that other money will go to other places as well. But again, the best opportunity is Israel, so you will see the most growth in Israel. And that's why over time, more capital will shift towards Israel. That's how capital works, okay? Yes, capital will allocate its resources, capital will put its eggs in different baskets, but ultimately you have to ask yourself, where is the best investment opportunity? And in the short term, not in the long term, but in the short term, it's going to be the Middle East. Okay? All right. How do we combat the war against truth? How do we engage in discussion that transcends our biases? Okay. We all live in fantasies. How do we overcome this? What techniques do you employ in your research? All right. Okay. So things that I do that I think are very important is, first of all, doubt. You always want to question yourself. You always want to ask yourself, am I correct? That's why making predictions is important. Because making predictions, it's actually about creating doubt in yourself. Because if the predictions are wrong, it's a mechanism for you to self-reflect and appreciate the limitations of your model, okay? So that's one strategy. Another strategy is debate. Okay? where you engage in people who think differently than you do. And I do that by watching a lot of YouTube videos, and I try to watch people of different political leanings, who have different viewpoints than I, because I'm interested in hearing their perspective, okay? So keep an open mind, engage in people who disagree with you, and have an honest debate with them as well as yourself. Now the last piece, and this is actually something that I do, but most people don't do, is I use my imagination. And all this means is I will go places, I will make certain assumptions that other people don't do, okay? That's why I think people find me so interesting, because I will say things that are imaginative, that are speculative, but which is not backed up by any evidence. Don't be afraid to do that, okay? If you want to seek the truth, you have to make some imaginative leaps into the unknown in order to find the truth, okay? The truth is not in front of you. The truth is often behind you or far away from you, okay? So you don't be afraid to just leap far, okay? Into the unknown. All right. All right, let's continue. Okay. So Asia and Australia are suffering the most from this global conflict. Why are these nations passive? Won't these nations intervene? Okay, again, a lot of this is misconception in that everyone thinks that the nation states are the constituent players in this game, and the nation states are all equal. They're not equal. They're not. Nation states, there are only certain nation states that have the capacity to project force overseas. Russia, America, maybe some European countries. Australia, Asia, and most European countries are just vassal states. They are not capable of playing this game. They're only capable of obeying. Okay? Maybe over time, they'll change the attitude and develop the capacity to play this game. But you have to remember that, like the GCC, a lot of these European countries, Japan, South Korea, Malaysia, Indonesia, Philippines, they're all co-opted by the CIA. Okay? These are all American vassal states. And so they're not capable of acting independently of American policy. There's the illusion that they are independent, but they're not, okay? And you can tell because of their actions. In that, you're absolutely right in that, okay, if you're Australia and you don't have any more jet fuel, well, then you should send your army or negotiate with Americans or negotiate with Iranians. But they're not doing that, okay? Japan is, in fact, negotiating with Iran, but Japan is still a vassal state of America. Pakistan is the mediator for this ceasefire talk between America and Iran, but guess what? Pakistan is also just another vassal state, okay? They pretend not to be, but by their actions, you know that they are, in fact, vassal states, all right?